I want to get back to Deborah. She is, she's the woman of the hour in a lot of ways with what we're seeing. I mean, Deborah Tavares has been right over all this. I'm not quite sure where you want to go, Deborah. We've had reports about, Elon Musk Amazon putting satellites, 5G satellites up in the sky, control grid, what have you. Go wherever you want to go, and I'll follow.
Well, of course, and I do have, as I say, some extremely important YouTube's up recently about the kill grid that is not only on land, air, space, but in the sea as well, and in all the rivers and small creeks. There are sensors. So I cover that in one of the last videos I have up. It's called Burned, Flooded, and Electrified. Go to stopthecrime.net and listen to that video. I also talk about some personal situations that my family have come up against in my reporting this kind of work. And I want to be very clear. My reporting is based on years and years of documents, so I'm familiar with documents. It's easy for me to pick up a document and then remember another document that I read. So this is just reporting on the documents that are available that all of you could also find if you put the kind of time in that I have for so long. So now I want to say this, and I'm going to start on this topic because, again, as I opened up the show, I said our survival will depend on what we now do today. And I'm going to go over that because we face a multi-pronged terrorist attacks. And I'm going to be discussing just another plan beyond the use of weather weapons. But weather weapons and directed energy weapons will be used to take down the power grid worldwide in small swaths here and there, and eventually a catastrophic event that will severely disrupt all normal functions of all our critical infrastructures in multiple regions for long durations. Remember that the attacks on the power grid are happening now, and the fires are certainly limiting our communication. We had quite a few days during the recent fires that we had no internet and we had no cell phone connectivity. So I would suggest that all of you that are listening look at alternative ways to keep connected with your family and friends because you're going to need to have alternative ways to stay connected. We're under mass attack. So I'm going to get into this because I was talking about the black sky, long durations of massive power outages, cascading failures. It's important to understand that our whole infrastructure worldwide is based on what I said earlier, is referred to as the world's largest machine, which is the electric power grid. All our lives depend on that. Our ability to have progressed to the degree that we have has been set up on the power grid as a foundation. You take away the power grid, and you take away life itself. And I have to underscore that multiple ways. So we're going to talk about what I mean specifically about that. I want everybody to think about this, and then I'm going to offer up a solution for this. So, Daniel, at the very end, please remind me 5 minutes to the end that I want to discuss some solutions, because questions everyone must now ask yourselves. How long could you survive without electricity? How long? All of you think about that. And we have to understand that the U.S. power grid is very, very vulnerable. It is dangerously outdated, and that is a known fact by the corporate government structure. Intentionally asset stripped and unfunded maintenance. Intentional. And now with weather weapons, they're saying due to severe climate change, we're going to have many outages. Yes, we're under mass attack. So there's going to also be more dangerous terrorist attacks on the power grid, and we're going to have likely multiple year blackouts. And
multiple year, I mean, are you talking about the whole country or certain areas, regions? Are you talking about regions?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Multiple year blackouts? What in the world would cause a multiple
Well, we're going to go
blackout?
over that. We're going to go over
All right,
that
I'm
now.
listening.
And this is important for everybody to understand very clearly. I also have a video up. It's called EMP and Earthquakes and something else. But I did that a few years ago. I would certainly ask all of you to revisit that video. It has hundreds of thousands of views at this point. But we're going to have man-made hits on the grid. They're all man-made because we're going to likely have a variety of assaults for plausible deniability. Certainly, we're likely to have an electromagnetic pulse, and I'll go over that in a little more detail in a minute. We also can have an international electromagnetic interference, more detail in a moment. Cyber terrorism, coordinated physical assaults. They talk about natural hazards, and I want to underscore the word natural hazards. There's no such thing as natural hazards. Everything is controlled. Earthquakes are created. Weaponized weather events of all nature is created. They talk about the seismic event, which is a high-magnitude earthquake. And then they talk about geomagnetic disturbance, which is severe space weather. And then, of course, hurricanes and other severe weather events. So what is, they talk about also the extreme malicious threats for cyber attacks and how critical it's going to be in being able to recover from large-scale infrastructure shutdowns. They talk about, given today's interindependency, focused protection and well-exercised multi-sectional planning is the key to a strike like that. So what we have is we have an interactive all-sector, whole-world exercise being conducted by this organization that is handling this black sky focus for resiliency. So let's go into what a blackout is going to do and will do, and I want all of you, as I go through this, to think about your workaround, okay? Because most Americans are unaware the power grid is aging and is as vulnerable as it is. And few know how the real story of how the grid is going to be used to hold our country and other countries hostage in the not-too-distant future. This is a fact. We're going to be held hostage by the grid. All of you will be held hostage. This is a form of also remotely relocating populations through the use of energy systems, and that's in play now. So we're going to literally be plunged into long-term darkness. What I would suggest is that everybody listening, turn off all of your lights. Do not use any power or electricity for a couple of days. Have a list and write down everything that you will need. Now, I want you to then, after you come up with that list, flashlights, et cetera, then come up with what a duration of time would look like for a few weeks. I will tell you that in these recent power outages, we've had to look at days of power outages here in the midst of fires. Now, if you're on rural land, country land, and you have wells, you have to think about how you're going to access the electricity to continue pumping your well pumps. You're going to also have to look at ways you can pump from topside water storage, the gallons that you store in water tanks above ground, because you can't, many wells just are not pumping enough gallons per minute to afford fire hoses. So you have to be really thinking about fending your properties with the fires and with the grid shutdowns. And I can tell you there are a number of people that have done workarounds around that. But again, I know this is all an extremely scary thought, but many people might feel helpless when you hear me talk about how the grid will go down. And it has been going down for short periods of time now for quite some time. And people here are just on the lighter side of what this looks like. People are losing freezer full of food, and it's all getting ruined, and it's expensive, and refrigerated medicines that go bad. And the very least, we're inconvenienced for only a few hours. There's no TV, no microwave, no computers. And we're always wondering, as we are here, just how long will the power be out this time? And our utility companies really have said they would tell us when they would shut the power off, but again, they're run by Rothschild, so the grid being purged and shut down and plunged into darkness is what they will do, because Rothschild is all part of the depopulation plan. So, if you knew that there was going to be a power outage, then you have to be thinking about what you would do. So, what it's going to look like, and here's what it's looked like in the past when there have been outages, and there have been many in the United States and elsewhere worldwide, but this is a general framework of what an outage is going to look like, because during times when entire metropolitan areas or regions experience blackouts, this becomes a widespread emergency, and it looks like this. It starts out by people who live in the power outage area rushing in, panic, to grocery stores and hardware stores, hoping to pick up critical supplies like food, water, batteries, flashlights, and generators. So there's your hint to start getting those things now. Then, as water and food start to run out, many people turn to looting, robbing, and stealing. Some looking to survive, some like heinous looking for wheat to prey on, many hoping to score something desirable to barter with when there's a lawlessness, and to get food, water, or medicine. And these things all start to escalate, and they get very ugly very quickly. And the average grocery store only has about 3 days' worth of inventory. And many of you have already noticed that due to COVID and the reduction of supply lines, which is also intentional, grocery store shelves are very thin. And so that's inventory is very much in question right now as well. And they say that, of course, we know that then the stores get wiped out, and when there's severe weather warnings. And think about our modern supply lines for a minute, just as I was discussing. And most important is going to be acquiring a supply of drinking water, because water alone can cause massive social chaos. So think about that. Water is so essential that people will do almost anything to get it. People can live without food for quite a while. But remember, water is required on a daily basis, and you can only survive for about 2 to 3 days without it. Hint, get water now. So it's important to understand, again, the grocery stores will be instantly sold out of drinkable liquids, leaving many people without a choice but violence, and people will turn to that as they get desperate. You'll see people in mass exodus trying to get away from the city. I want to add something here. All our roads are tracked. There are cell phone towers. We have kill grids set up around us with frequencies. In that video I referred to, burned, flooded, and electrified, I believe it's in that one where I discuss the U.S.-Mexican wall and the fact that it is mostly wireless. And when you hear about what that wall does and how it can be relocated in a few hours, the technologies, we're literally going to be walled in with frequencies and kill grids and not able to travel or get out. Remember, travel is all part of the reduction plan under COVID, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals, eliminating travel. So we're going to see mass exodus of people cramming the roads. We've seen that here, people trying to get out of fires on very narrow roads, very dangerous, and likely using violence or whatever they need to do to survive. So when you look at events like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, for example, there were many victims, and there was fighting and killing over clean water. So the traffic jams on the roads leading out of town due to people running out of gas and abandoning their vehicles, this will actually block the highways and trap thousands of people in cities. And this actually happened also during Hurricane Rita. That would be in Puerto Rico. So important to know what I see in fire evacuation zones. I see narrow country roads being blocked when people are told to evacuate. Particularly with large motorhomes, people are now living in motorhomes and moving around because they can't stay in one place, or there's no housing, or being collapsed economically. So now we're going to be hit with a massive, massive shutdown. So what's really important and comes the inevitable mass breakout of waterborne sickness and disease, and that happens because people start to get desperate and they start drinking from unfiltered, dirty water sources. Hint, get filters now, okay? There's a clue. Escalating outbreaks of violence during looting as unprepared citizens panic and start fighting over any remaining liquids. People will again start to loot and search for water or anything else of tradable value. So if you do get your hands on some water, how much water can you lug and for how long? Water's heavy, and it's not easily able to be moved from place to place. So besides that, even a 55-gallon drum of pure water isn't going to last forever like everything else. Any supplies you get your hands on when a crisis starts will absolutely provide all of you with short-term subsistence that you need. Short-term. This is not going to get you through lengthy and long durations of power outages. We're thinking short-term. Ideally, people that have wells on country properties will certainly have access to water. I would recommend that everybody at this point certainly stock up on as much water as you can conceivably get, and consider what it might look like for you to relocate out of a mega city. We see that happening in San Francisco. They're fleeing San Francisco in droves, and in fact, the ferries that used to ferry people from the other side, the north side of the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, are 98% empty because San Francisco is virtually shut down. Stores are closed up. We're going to have more closures of stores. We're going to have more people. We're being told we're going to have a second wave of COVID. We never got out of our first wave. And, of course, we know that this is a plandemic, and I discuss that in some COVID videos that I have up as well. So,
Deborah,
the longer the power...
Let me interject. We got 2 or 3 minutes before the break. I'm just sitting here taking notes. I'm just really soaking this in. A couple of questions before we get to the break. Do you have a time frame in mind on this where it's going to accelerate? And is this regional? Is this Western United States?
It's happening now, Daniel.
Is this all United States? Yes.
Yes, the world. Okay. It's happening now. It has been amplified because they're claiming that increased weather events is taking down the power grid. Now, again, I have to underscore this is all intentionally planned because the weather is controlled. Okay, well, through the technology.
I ask it like this. This is why I ask it. Okay, I'm in Missouri. I'm 2,000 plus miles away from California. I see what's going on in California from a distance. You're right at ground zero, and all these things you're describing are beginning and accelerating in California. In Missouri, nothing. In fact, we've got plenty of water. That's what I mean. Is this just Western United States, or is this all of the United States, or in a time frame for this?
Okay, this is going to be all of the United States, in fact, worldwide. And as I said, it's happening now in small geographical areas where power is being shut off. And certainly when they hit and target an area with some type of a fire event or storm-related event or flood-related, which is going to really become a problem for east of the Mississippi River, is mass flooding. We can see that. And then mass power outages. It'll all be weather-related, or I shouldn't say all. There will be terrorist attacks, and we're going to go into some of the ways in which the grid has been attacked over the years. But it's important to know that the longer the power stays off, the weaker and weaker societal order becomes. And that's what we have to recognize.
Why did they start with California? Why did they choose that? They didn't
start with California. California is known for being, well, it was 7 for GDP, a nation state, more or less, no longer. But the appearance is that it starts with California to keep people off guard so they're not preparing in their own areas.
Because, that's California, don't worry about it. Yeah.
while you may not be seeing what you're hearing in California, you may be under health orders for social distancing for the COVID situation. You may find that your supply lines are diminished when you go to the box stores or your small grocery stores. You may find that those health orders have literally closed a number of businesses. We're losing small restaurants in the droves, and they're not returning. We're seeing empty commercial buildings everywhere. Here also, the schools are not being allowed to resume, which of course no one should be sending their children to school anyway. That is considered child abuse in all of the research that I have done, intentional dumbing down and not allowing our acceleration into knowing what is real. The kids are taught about global warming and how it's their fault, and particularly the older generation's fault, for creating an unsustainable world that's not going to last more than 10 years and they're all going to die.